Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I'm back again today, and today I'm going to be talking about not the NBA for once, but actually the NFL today. I'm going to be talking specifically about the NFC North and my predictions for the standings for this season, and basically how I think that the division will unfold and how all the different teams in the division will do. So basically, I'll briefly be talking about each team, what I think their outlook is for the season, and how they'll do, whether they'll make the playoffs, how they'll do in division, and stuff like that. And we'll go from there. So to start off, if you don't know, last year the standings for the division were as follows: Bears were 12-4, Vikings were 8-7-1, Packers were 7-8-1, and the Lions were 6-10. This year, I actually think that the division will play out fairly similar, as a bit of a spoiler alert. But to get into it further, I'll first start with the Chicago Bears, who I think will be finishing in first place in the division. And I think that they will be sporting a record of 10-6. So just as background for all these record predictions I did go through each team's schedule and look and kind of tried to predict games that they would win versus games that they would lose. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to precisely hit this win mark. I think that they'll definitely be in this range, but if I just kind of had to put like a number on it, I'm going to put 10-6 for the Bears and so on and so forth for the rest of the teams. But don't think that I'm saying that like if the Bears were to go 11-5, it's not like I would be shocked. I'm just saying I think they'll most likely be about 10-6. I think they will have a bit of a tougher schedule than they had last year. I think last year they benefited from having not an easy schedule, but a schedule where they weren't a team expected to be all that good, and so they got a bit of an easier time. I think this year they're facing a few harder teams on the docket, and I think for those reasons they won't struggle as much per se, but they will have some challenges. Like I know they have to play for sure the Cowboys and the other team in the NFC East is good, which is I'm blanking, but the Eagles. They have to play both of those teams for sure. Those are going to be tough games, I think. They of course have to play the teams within their own division, and then I think if I recall, they have to play not the NFC East, but they have to, or the AFC East, but they have to play, I think, the AFC West this year, which means they'll have to play the Chargers and the Chiefs, and that's the same for all these other teams in the division, who I'll get to. But either way, between those four games, Eagles, Cowboys, Chiefs, Chargers, and then having to play their own division, that's not as easy as a schedule as you'd think. And so for those reasons, I think the Bears will still be a good team. They still got a good defense, but they did lose some key pieces. They did lose Adrian Amos, who is a good safety. They lost him to the Packers. And they had a really good receiving core last year, and they still have a decent one, but they have lost a bit of... They had a lot of depth. Like I think they had about 4 guys that I felt comfortable with last year, and now this year I'd say they have about 2 guys. I think they have Allen Robinson, and I can't remember. I think they still have Kevin White, but they lost like Bellamy, who was a pretty good receiver for them, and they lost one other guy who I liked. So they've lost a little bit there. They lost Jordan Howard, who is a pretty good running back. They've still got Trubisky, of course, and he's going to do decent and hopefully improve a bit for them. But I think just overall, they're going to be like an average division winner. Not great, not bad though, of course. Moving on, next I have the Vikings in second place in the division at 9-7. I think as a Minnesotan, I definitely had higher expectations for this team based on I thought that they had such a great roster last year. I thought they'd be a lot better last year, and I was hoping that they would be a lot better this year. But really, when I look at the schedule, I see a lot of games that they could definitely win, but I see a lot of games where I wouldn't be shocked if they lost either. Just based on some of their games last year, I don't know how much I trust this team. They lost to the Bills at home last year. It was like 17-0 was the final score. So when a team does that, I don't know how much I can trust them. They kept all their important pieces. They kept Anthony Barr. Dalvin Cook's healthy. They lost some depth at the defensive back position. They lost. Well, let's see here. They still have Xavier Rhodes, but after him, you've got like Trey Waynes, and then it really falls off. Like your next best dude is is maybe Mackenzie Alexander, and besides that, you don't really have any DBs that you trust. They lost Andrew Sendejo. They lost Andrew Harris, who was a good backup safety. They still have Harrison Smith, of course, but they lost some good defensive backfield guys. Offensively, they're basically the same team with the two great receivers in Diggs and Thielen. Cousins, hopefully, people are saying he'll gel more with Gary Kubiak and Stefanski than he would with John DeFilippo. Remains to be seen. Yeah, I think this is a team where, like, again, I wouldn't be shocked if they finished 11-5, but I wouldn't be shocked if they finished 8-8 either. It's just a weird team, but they have all the pieces there to make them a good team. They have everybody returning who is important, and they still have a great offense and defense, and you could argue this is the most talented roster just on paper in the NFL, so they should be good. Third in the division, I have the Packers at 8-8. They made some good moves this offseason. They acquired Preston Smith from the Redskins, which was an underrated move, and they acquired Adrian Amos, who was on the Bears. And yes, he is going to be a pretty good replacement for HaHa Clinton Dix. So yeah, I like those acquisitions for the team. Offensively, I don't really know what I think of this team, though. You've got Rodgers, of course. You've got Jimmy Graham. But you lost Randall Cobb, who to me was basically one of their most dynamic outside presences. Yes, he had slowed down a bit in the last couple of years, but he still was a valuable player on this team. He knew the offense well. He gelled with Rodgers well. He had speed. He had gone through a few injury issues, but I still thought that he was a good player overall. He went to the Cowboys. He's gone. You're left with Devontae Adams and honestly a bunch of wide receivers I hadn't really heard of until I looked up more about them, but I was very unfamiliar with this wide receiving core. Basically, they're going to be relying very heavily on Devontae Adams, I realized, and he's basically going to be this team's entire offense as far as receiving. The backfield is fine. Aaron Jones is supposed to be better, supposed to be improved, getting another year under his belt with experience last year. I don't know. He just seems like an average back to me. I'm not really sold on him yet for sure. Of course, if Rodgers plays up to the level that he's capable of playing, this team could easily go 10-6 and win the division. But I wouldn't be surprised if they were as bad as 7-9. I'm not going to go as low as 6-10 because I think they still do have an improved defense, and they do still have Devontae Adams and Rodgers who will carry them to some good wins. So I'd say best case scenario 10-6, worst case scenario 7-9, but I'm putting them at about 8-8. And then they would be higher, but again, they have a lot of those tough games that the other teams in the division have. Like they have to play the Chiefs, they have to play the Chargers, they have to play the Eagles, they have to play the Cowboys. They've got to play their own division, which is a pretty tough division. And for all those reasons, I'm not putting them higher than 8-8. But they could, of course, surprise me if Rodgers just turns it on this year and puts in an MVP season, which he definitely could. And lastly, which is not surprising for anybody, the Detroit Lions. Oh boy, what do we say about this team anymore? They've got Matthew Stafford. They don't have much else. This defense is average. They've got Darius Slay, who's a very good player. Honestly, nothing much stands out on defense besides Darius Slay to me. They've got a few okay players to surround him. They've got some decent linebackers. They've got an okay defensive line. The rest of the backfield is okay as far as defense. Like safeties are fine. I believe they still have Glover Quinn. As on offense, I don't know. I don't see much to be excited about on this team. You've got Marvin Jones, but this team just reeks of 5-11, and I think that is what they will be. They'll be able to win some games, basically just because they're a mediocre NFL team, and they'll probably win a few against really bad NFL teams because even though this team isn't good, they're still professionals and experienced, and they'll be able to beat unexperienced bad teams. So I'll give them a few wins, but they're in that bad spot where they're like fully matured at what their team should be. Like Stafford's like I think 30 now, 31, and the team is regressed significantly from what it was like 3 years ago. So I don't know what to think of this team. They're never going to be that good, honestly. Best case scenario, I see his team being about 7-9. Worst case scenario, I could see them 5-11 is what I have them at. I see them that being about their floor. But yeah, I mean they could be 7-9, and I wouldn't be shocked. But I think that's also like their best case scenario. Maybe 8-8 if they somehow pull a rabbit out of the hat and some player that we've never heard of has a great season. But 5-11, I think is pretty realistic. So that's what I'm predicting for this year for the NFC North, guys. I've got the Bears winning the division at 10-6, followed by the Vikings at 9-7, followed by the Packers at 8-8, and followed by the Lions at 5-11. Feel free to share your thoughts on who will win the division below and what their records may be, and I hope to see you guys next time.